The East always weaves a spell to enchant the West. The Isle of Penang, where you fall in love with Asia. When the British tide went out in the Orient, a few men were left upon the shore. Some because they loved the East and would not go, others because in some mild way they were eccentric.
This is the last days of the British Raj. Well, I never keep servants for less than about 25 years, because we understand one another, you see.
Today, apart from such a rare glimpse, they live on only in the literature of colonialism.
Tell us, Brian, I'm leaving at 5:30.
Yeah, very much.
Take us away. I'm finished.
The first British settlement in the Far East, Penang Island lies 2 miles off the west coast of Malaysia and, in little more than 100 square miles, somehow contrives to be all things to all men. The conglomeration of style in Georgetown, the capital, reflects the crisscross of Western traders with every race of the Far East for nearly 2 centuries. It's the very stuff of Asia, a cultural jigsaw which has to celebrate New Year's Day 4 times. No doubt about it, the place has character. At first sight, it can seem as Chinese as Hong Kong. Though since independence in 1963, this former colony has been run with the British stamp of order by Malaysians, and with its good schools and unemployment, boasts the world's best educated traffic wardens. The easygoing, unconfident Malaysians, always outworked and outrun by those efficient Singapore Chinese, first realized they'd be able to govern their federation, it said, when they discovered they could run an international airline. So far, Penang's little airport can only handle small 2-engine jets, but they're lengthening the runway and the jumbos are on the way. Soon, Penang will no longer be Asia's best-kept, smiling secret.
Right, thank you. Thank you very much.
So now's the time to take a good look. Founded in 1786, Georgetown already had 200 homes before the first fleet sailed into Botany Bay and they started to build Sydney. Today, with 400,000 people on the island, new high-rises poke through rose-red rooftops behind the go-downs and the stilt houses of the boat people. Though it was then 6 months' sail from Britain, Penang soon attracted traders and, since the fortunes of towns ebb and flow like those of men, lived by boom or bust. First pepper, then sugar and tin and rubber made fortunes for the merchants, and the island was on its roller coaster of prosperity and slump. The rich Chinese and the governing English built their elegant homes, and much later Noel Coward observed Penang was a first-rate place for second-rate people. In this heat, time moves slowly, and Trishaw still wait outside a colonial hotel little change since Somerset Maugham came to stay in the 20s, and was also rather bitchy. But despite their world weariness, to me, Penang provides endless delight. So, British and Chinese were prospering, then came the Indians as convicts and labourers, adding the spicy scent of curry to Chinese Georgetown. Ceylonese and Thais went into this exotic racial blend, and together they worked some magic spell. Amid such serenity, such Pacific people, the most unexpected festivals can break out.
Jalan, jalan.
Penang's Hindus celebrate Thaipusam, when their god Subramania makes his annual journey through the streets in a great silver chariot. In the god's path, 60,000 coconuts are smashed and the street becomes a Milky Way. Each one is a request for good fortune. Thaipusam is the most awesome of festivals when Hindus repenting past sins or showing gratitude for blessings bestowed yield their minds to the chanting and drum beats, dropping out of consciousness and preparing for the most extreme mortification of the flesh. When their minds are on God, they say they feel no pain. But you may find, as I did, that it's sometimes not too easy to watch. Penang was a pirate hideaway when, almost 2 centuries ago, the British arrived seeking spices for the East India Company, led by Captain Francis Light from Suffolk, who is handsomely remembered. As you might expect of the founder of Penang, Francis Light was a most enterprising man. When he landed on this headland, he found that his marines and his sepoys were having trouble in clearing the undergrowth, for Penang wood can blunt an axe. So he hit upon the perfect method of turning flagging workers into willing ones. He loaded a cannon with small coins and silver dollars, and he fired it into the bush. The men didn't just work, they stampeded, and the first camp was established right here. But such febrile beauty bred mosquitoes, and the ages on Penang's gravestones are distressingly young. These short lives are best remembered by a man who arrived here in 1930 as a junior colonial servant. Salt Cunningham Brown was a sort of Lord Mayor of Penang when independence came, but he refused to leave the island, of which he is now a sympathetic historian.
Nobody knew anything about malaria in those days. They thought it was some sort of miasma that came up out of the ground at night. Probably rotting vegetation or something of that sort.
Yes, yes.
And it knocked them all off.
If it really was the white man's grave, how did they get so many young people out here?
It was the tremendous inducements. Terrific inducements, financial. Anybody in the East India Company's service got a sort of salary that was 120, 150 times greater than an equivalent salary at home.
So, I mean, every 23-year-old clerk was as rich as a Maharaja.
As rich as a Maharaja. They were multi-millionaires.
So you were taking a gamble. You gambled your life.
Of course.
On coming out
That's
here.
right.
And most of these are the chaps who lost.
These are the ones that lost. You see, what would a man do with all that money out here? The very first thing most of them did was to buy a complete mountain for himself. I built an enormous bungalow on top of each one with 100 coolies to bring the bath water up from the river every morning. They lived very elegantly indeed.
An old Scottish doctor, still living elegantly on his own mountaintop, was practicing at London's Royal Albert Dock Hospital in the 30s when he answered an advertisement for a colonial medical assistant, came out in 36, and he's been here ever since. Dr. Reed Tweedy, interned by the Japanese, took with him to jail a Red Cross box marked Poison, which contained 20 bottles of whiskey. Now he's 74, still an individualist on a mountaintop, still living in total isolation.
That's a great advantage.
Is it?
Yes, because you can't get bothered by, well, say, hysterical women ringing you up because they won't expect me to travel 3 miles to the village to see them.
You don't get any night calls?
No, not now.
Now tell me about you. You must be a bit of a hypochondriac yourself if you're worried about catching cold all the time.
Oh yes, I have a cold allergy.
Now,
How
how many sweaters have you got here?
Only 7.
Only 7.
Yes.
It feels like about 57. Actually.
But then there are other woolies as well.
I see. How did this this allergy arrive?
I think from my father. My father had hay fever, so he was allergic to pollen, and I'm allergic to cold.
But do you get many colds?
Never get cold since I'm taking vitamin C.
Since you're taking vitamin C and wearing all these woolies?
Yes, but I change these all the time because I never wear wet clothes. Never let clothes get wet on you.
Now you buy these woolies, how many at a time?
About 50.
50?
Yeah.
50. Why so many?
Because they stopped manufacturing. Now this blue one, that's been out of production after about 10 years. I've only got about 50 left.
And how about your selotopia? I mean, that's hard to get to.
That's quite difficult to get to.
How many of those do you buy at a time?
Well, I only buy a dozen at a time, of course.
Do these get thrown away, these sweaters then? Or,
Oh yes, no, I give them to poor people. There aren't many poor people in this country, but they use them as dusters.
What are your main problems as far as your patients are concerned, not your own allergy?
The main problem nowadays in the rubber industry, actually, is malingering, because they brought in a very high rate of pay for sick labourers.
So what's your ploy for handling this? You give them Epsom salts or something?
No, that's very old-fashioned.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I try psychology, persuade them that really well.
How do you do that?
Well, by telling them they're not going to get sick pay. That works very well.
Why, incidentally, do you stay out here still?
But once you've been in the Far East, you want to get back to the Far East.
And why is that? Is the weather, the women, the food, the way of life?
All these things, my dear sir. Especially the second, we'll say.
Really?
My wife's not going to hear this film, is she?
No, of course not.
Well, I'm very glad to hear that.
Wives are not permitted to watch
That's right.
ITV.
Well, you've seen the life in the East, isn't it? Lovely life. You know the secret of getting on with people?
Tell me.
Like people. If you like people, they'll probably like you. And I'm very fond of all these people. So, of course, we get on very well.
Even the malingerers?
Oh, I've got a soft spot for them. I mean, straight on Sublime, Tris Piggy and Creja Punyor and Ruma Ruma Tau. And the old-fashioned type, you see. Young people don't do it the way I do. They want X-rays. They want things called scans, whatever a scan is. Whereas I examine people very carefully.
Dr. Tweedy still looks carefully after the rubber estate where, in 1948, communist terrorists murdered 3 English planters and Malaya's 12-year emergency began.
Severe lower abdominal pain.
She's a bit of a malinger, isn't she?
She was a malinger.
She's excused boots, is she?
Dr. Tweedy conducts his private practice in the decrepit wooden hut he calls Harley Street. He was a student under Lord Horder, but today finds he's left most medical competition far behind.
How long have you been in this very surgery, Doctor?
Oh, since 1946.
It's 30 years, yeah.
Maga.
It may not be antiseptic, scrubbed and spotless, but outside the benches are full. Dr. Tweedy and his patients have enormous faith in vitamins and rather thick needles.
This is what I call my MI, magic injection.
Your magic what?
Injection. An injection called the magic injection.
It looks rather an old needle, actually.
It's a brand new needle yesterday. Would you like to try it? Just lie down and I'll try the needle on you first.
Thank you.
Right. It contains vitamin A and vitamin C. Most effective. And this is a sort of universal panacea.
Couldn't he take them orally? It'd be rather more comfortable.
Oh, that wouldn't be psychologically the same.
Oh, he's paying for an injection. He's told we're going to get it.
I get patients coming from all over Malaya here, you know. Very hard skin, this chap. Kanja. A little pain only, he says. Terrible?
Why do you measure them? I didn't quite understand that.
Because I'm terrified I drink too little. Fine thing you're doing to me, Alan. Whicker, I should be working all this time instead of sitting here boozing up with you.
It's lucky you don't require too much persuasion, though.
It's such an honour, don't you see?
Apart from carrying on your work, what are your other reasons for staying here?
The people are very charming and friendly. And of course in India, where I was for 3 years, you've got to remember that they're very strictly a caste system. You must not do things that would not be done, or you would lose, Indians must not, or they would lose caste. Once, when I came to this country and I saw a photograph of Attlee, the Prime Minister of England, sitting at the tomb of Gandhi, and he was surrounded by Indians, and he was having great difficulty in taking his shoes off. Well, of course, that's not done in India. Servants do that for you.
But don't you take your own shoes off?
Of course I don't take my own shoes off. I haven't taken my own shoes off for 45 years.
There's also an unchanging quality of life out in the kampongs, the country villages where the Malays live and fish and farm exactly as they have for centuries. In their lush isle, the only remaining white planter to own his estate, with 170 workers and their families, arrived here in 1921 from Wallington in Surrey. Hugh Watts is 80 and his wife Mary 83. Their men are Tamils, and since Mary's been caring for them all since birth from this plantation house, they're fiercely loyal. When trade union officials came to organise them against the bosses, the black eyes they got from the oppressed workers required Mary's medical attention. Mary Watts trained as a nurse at Guy's early in the century, and each morning, running the estate's cod liver oil parade, she keeps her hand in.
Huh?
They don't seem to be reluctant to take it.
Oh, no, they
Mrs.
don't mind
Watts.
taking it. And you'll notice that they swallow with their mouths open. They don't take it with their lips, so you can use one spoon for everybody.
Saves the washing out.
Well, it saves time.
Now, this is just because you think their diet is inadequate in some ways, is it?
Oh, they need some vitamins and it
Yeah.
makes a lot of difference. Now, read a number.
How much cod liver oil do you get through, incidentally?
Quite a good bit. Several gallons.
Yes.
No problem.
They're certainly not frightened.
No.
This is an old
This
patient.
is an old patient. Here. This one's really finished. It just wants a bit of drying up with a bit of powder, that's all.
He wants a bit of attention.
They like having their things, they come. They like having their This one's quite nice, actually.
She cares for him, just as on this plantation she's cared for his parents and grandparents.
These children have medicine. Two of them that are anemic.
How did they miss the cod liver oil parade?
Oh, no, they have it down here.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, no, I'm going to kill her.
What a face, that little girl. What a
Wicked
face.
little thing.
Oh.
Anyway, love. Are they? All right. What
Now,
about?
I don't quite understand, Mrs. Watts. Why are their children in here? Why aren't they at home? I mean,
The mothers go out to work,
Oh, I see.
and their houses are shut up.
Yes.
And we've had one or two bear cases where in these ATAP houses, the kids have been left behind and then the place has been burnt. Had a child with a 3rd-degree burn.
Ah.
Oh, don't look at that. That's nearly 2. Just about 2. Look here, Neil, chocolate, fella. Hey, I'm sorry, fella.
The old and the new faces of Penang.
Vale, Coda. Vale, Coda. Put it. Put it. Just put it. Just put it. Put it, put it, put it. Ah, that's right. Vale, Coda.
That fixed that, didn't it?
No man should be found in close proximity to a woman, says Muslim law, unless they're married. So the climax of a Malay wedding, after all financial arrangements have been concluded, is the sitting in state, when the couple are sprinkled with flowers and holy water. The groom is 27 and a clerk, but today, a sultan. He's not supposed to smile on this solemn occasion, but it must be hard not to seem pleased. After the good luck sprinkling, each guest receives a gift. And we all tried to make sure they were getting spliced in the right way. For all its oriental enchantment, Penang still shows the old British presence. There's cleanliness and order and St. George. And though the British Raj may have faded away, taking with it its administrators and eastern armies, a sort of crumbling grandeur survives where northern blood was once warmed by the gentle intuition of Asia. Here at the Penang Chinese Cricket Club, Queen Victoria was put up on her pedestal by the Queen's Chinese back in 1930, and she survived the war in suitably regal and lofty style. Before the arrival of the Japanese army, she had been tactfully encased in a roll of plywood, and a kindly carpenter had bored 2 eye holes so she could see out and know what was going on. After the Japanese arrived, they placed their rising sun flag on top of that plywood pile, and as the army marched by, would salute, regarded through her peepholes impassively and balefully by the Queen, who was, I'm sure, not amused. Another formidable lady's been left behind upon this tropical shore, for here, as everywhere else in the world, you can find elderly English ladies caring deeply for animals. Mrs. Daphne Jones is 60, her sister 75. Together they've run the Penang branch of the RSPCA for more than a quarter of a century, delighting dogs and keeping rabies at bay. The sisters have lived in Penang all their lives and much prefer animals to people.
All right, all right. Come on. Now wait, wait. Here you are. Come on, Mum. No, no. Come here, don't be naughty.
25,000 animals pass through these concerned hands each year.
No, no. No, Brownie, you're not to do that. Go on and finish that up.
This isn't sufficient for one meal, but they do get the little extra meat. Meat is so expensive these days.
Yeah. You see, I find it very hard driving around to tell the difference between an ordinary dog, a squatter's dog, and a stray dog. How do you tell?
Oh, it's instinctive. After 25 years of doing this work, I instinctively know when a dog has been abandoned.
From monkeys to chickens to strays, no animals beyond their care. Around town, the valiant sisters have put up collection boxes.
Oh, you poor little darlings.
On their regular rounds, they gather up the abandoned kittens and puppies which have been posted to them.
Yes, wait a minute. These are discarded chickens that are faulty. You see?
And what are you going to do with those?
We'll give them a quick end.
I see. What would they...
They die in any case. And I can't do anything with them because they are faulty.
And if they're faulty, they just leave them here to die?
Just leave them, yes. Sometimes they're still in the egg and they can't come out. It's amazing the tenacity of a little thing like that. It'll go on cheeping for hours till it dies. And it's pathetic.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
why I do this. I'm putting them into the chloroform box where they'll just get a whiff of chloroform and go to sleep. The air holes here enable the little birdies to go to sleep normally. They're not suffocated. They get air as well as chloroform, and they will go to sleep.
It's not going to put your sister to sleep as well, is it?
No, there isn't sufficient to. Well, I think we'd better move on, don't you?
Yes.
I mew like a kitten. There's a little black one over here that I've been trying to catch for some time. He's so tiny, but he deserves to get away, really.
Ah.
But he's become wily. He doesn't. Oh, there he is.
So he is.
Can you see him?
Yes. Oh, he's very friendly, isn't he?
Come on. Well, he does that every time. Where? I know, it's a little black one.
Yes.
Yes, I've been trying to catch it, but I can't.
You go there.
Oh, it's gone into this hole over here. There's a hole. No, never mind. Another day.
What is this for?
For the rabbits over there. They don't get lettuce. Those rabbits are for sale.
You're buying the food to give to the rabbits that are going to be sold to be eaten.
I buy lettuce, good lettuce for them.
What do you think that the Chinese think about you? Do you think they think you're bonkers?
Yes, they did in the beginning, but I have found them watching me feed animals and pick them up, and one will say to another
Yes.
in Chinese, "What is she up to? What is there behind this?" And the other one will turn around and say, "She is a Christian."
That excuses everything, does it?
That explains everything. It doesn't excuse it, it explains it.
So this gentle retired schoolmistress carries on riding to the rescue. You see, it's not only old British men who've been left behind upon this tropical shore, amid a race which has even been known, whisper it, to eat dogs.
On a Sunday we get big dogs on the road as well.
Now, what do? They won't put them down themselves.
Oh no, it's against their religion,
I see.
because they're Buddhists.
It's lucky it's not against your religion, isn't it? Now, how much of your life is it given up to the RSPCA?
Well, most of it. Because I never know when I'm going to be called out or when people will come to the gate and ask for my help. And I've got such a large family of animals at home to look after. I've no time to go out. And besides, I can't play bridge. I don't know one card from another. I am an animal lover. I can understand their feelings. When they are being treated at the vet's place, I feel their pain. And I put aside quite a lot of my earnings. And at the moment, I'm struggling on my savings, but they're going down with the present rise in prices. It's getting a bit awkward.
How many animals do you have to put down in a year?
I myself have got to put down sometimes 1,500 to 2,000.
Now, how do you do this?
The little animals, the kittens and the cats, and the puppies put into special RSPCA chloroform boxes.
Mm-hmm.
And the big dogs shot. Well, we use a humane killer.
You use that yourself?
Yes. But if I can avoid it, and there is an inspector on hand, I prefer them to do it because they're much better at the job. And as I get older, I hate the work.
Yeah. Now, when you stop, Mrs. Jones, when you stop your work, who's going to take over?
I'm leaving that to the Almighty. There's no one really to take over the work that my sister and I do. No one. But I don't know how long our little branch will be able to function over here. We're in rather stormy waters at the moment.
Financially?
Yes.
Despite the financial worries of poor Mrs. Jones and her RSPCA, there's one place in Penang where everyone has plenty of money to spare for animals. The Penang Turf Club and the world's most dedicated gamblers, the Chinese.
And the track remains good. Brilliant fashion. And the Rockfin Racing handcar was slow, so your affectation and diplomat.
It's a modern and elegant course. The only trouble is, something's missing.
700 meters to go. Expectations and bamboo battle for a lead.
Look where you will, the Turf Club has everything except horses. In fact, the actual race is being run more than 400 miles away down in Singapore. The commentaries broadcast to the thousands of racegoers who've come here merely to bet. The only activity they have to watch is a gentle game of golf with parasols. And you know how exciting that can be. But there are racing stables here, and in a gorgeous setting, the seahorses of Penang exercise for their next meeting. The most famous race goer in the land is a Malay aristocrat of 73, Tunku Abdul Rahman, Prime Minister from 1957 until 7 years after the creation of this independent state. The father of Malaysia, as he's called, has retired to Penang.
I have an attachment for this island, Penang. In the first place, I was in school here.
Yes.
The Penang Free School.
But one thought perhaps you might go back to your native state, back to Alor Star.
Yes, that's true. My home is there, my house is there, and but what I miss most, and which I have not got there anymore, are my old playmates, my friends. They have all died. Every one of them have died. Well, like all men, what you miss most is the youth. You can't, when you get to this age, there are something you can't enjoy quite as much.
Because in your youth, you were quite a boulevardier, were you not?
I say I was a little bit of a gay chap and a playboy, but I've never been serious-minded man, you know. I've always been light-hearted. This part of Penang. Yeah, so clean.
Beautiful.
Dry.
Beautiful. Now that's your private beach over there, really, isn't it?
There's no private beach.
Well, it's as near private as you can get. This is where we let the net out.
Yeah. Boleh tanya elok lah kot. Ha?
Oh, he's got a crab.
Oh. Ah, he got caught. The string got caught there. Ada, dekat dah. Huh?
They're much better fishermen than we are, your granddaughter.
Yeah. Catching the prawn.
It seems that the Malaysian government is not anxious to have any foreigners living here.
Because they're afraid the Chinese and Indians and Indonesians If they open the thing up for them to come in, they will rush here. The danger is more from India and China. Very much more from India and China.
And what could India do? India has its own problems. They hardly want to...
No, they send their population to swarm us in millions. They got 500 million. It's nothing for them to send 10 million people to come here in one day.
What about insurgency here, Tonku?
In fact, they are now making trouble in the border area of Thailand here.
Yes.
But these people are showing activity today. That's a worrying thing.
But that's imminent, isn't it? That could happen in a big way next week.
Yeah, it could happen anytime.
With only Thailand left between Malaysia and the overwhelming mass of China, they're always braced against infiltration across a border only 75 miles away. For already more than half Penang's population is Chinese. So far, the threat from overseas remains inscrutable. Tourists have not yet swallowed up little Penang. Some Japanese have landed and click away. Otherwise, a few French, some Australians and Germans. The first big tourist hotel is operating, the first pale tourist skin suffering. Palm trees are poisoned to make room for the 13 new hotels planned, one of them with 1,000 bedrooms. Penang is about to be changed forever. Some see such development as the answer to the island's economic problems, others as a plague which will destroy its rare charm. Both extremes could come true. The middle course of controlled tourism is advocated by the governor of Penang presiding in the fine old British residency.
Now, how many acres have you got here?
26.
26, really. And how many gardeners?
The garden department has about 16 gardeners assigned here.
Tun Sardon Jubir had offered to drive me round his island. The cheerful politician abandoned his Cadillac for the ton-up fun car he'd brought back from a spell in America with the United Nations. Not at all the quiet afternoon spin I'd expected.
Your outriders know the route you've decided, Governor.
Yes. Sometimes they drive very fast.
Well,
You can't see anything much when you drive so fast.
because I'm just remembering, Governor, that when President Ford was driving recently, he hit another car, didn't he?
Somebody trying to double cross it, probably.
Going on an ordinary drive is going to seem so boring after this, Governor.
Oh, don't worry. If you want to see the champion drivers, you get the terror of your life.
How do you feel about the invasion of all these big hotels along this coast? There's a big one going up here. Now, you're going to have lots like that, aren't you?
We have to tighten the rule regulations, and we have to plug in all the loopholes. You see, tourists bring in more contact with outside world.
Penang has been quite lucky. It hasn't had much trouble with the communists.
Oh, yes, we have shooting and whatnot, but not open warfare, because we have got not the type of jungle, you know, they can hide. Well, if everybody cooperated, they never got any money, no information, no food, no point of staying. They will die of starvation there.
Sult Cunningham Brown almost died of starvation after being sentenced to death by the Japanese and spending 9 months in a medieval dungeon in Sumatra. Of the thousands of Allied prisoners forced to build a railway, he was one of the few to survive.
I was utterly at home here, and I knew about food. I mean, I knew what you could eat and what you couldn't. Whereas these poor chaps refused to eat slugs and snakes. They wouldn't eat any of the jolly good food you can get in any part of the jungly bits of the countryside. The snails are excellent. Earthworms, too, but you've got to clean them. You've got to leave them overnight and sort of squeeze them down until they haven't got any more grit in them, and then they're splendid. And so on, but these fellows wouldn't eat it. Very few did.
So you were the ideal prisoner, really, because you got mentally adjusted and you were physically able to eat a dog when a lot of chaps arriving from England wouldn't fancy
quite.
it.
I prefer a cat.
Oh.
Oh, okay, a dog is a bit stringy. But you don't mind what goes into the pot, you just eat it.
You've already lost Mrs. Jones now.
Yes, exactly. Permanent enemy.
Do you see yourself as an Occidental still?
I find myself lost in conversation with people who've lived in Britain and only lived in Britain.
Yes.
After a very short time, one's subject of common interest on both sides dry up, I think.
Yet you see, must be regarded as a bit of an odd fish, too.
Yes, I
think
so. I think they think I'm a very odd fish.
Because there is a caricature, is there not, of the colonial administrator, thank you, the planter. I mean, there's something that was started by Somerset Maugham and still persists, does it not? You're gin-soaked, waited upon.
Beer sodden.
Beer sodden.
Well, I don't know, of course. I know exactly what you mean. And I don't think there was ever any real substance in it at all. But it was, as you say, Somerset Maugham probably was at the back of it with his habitual cattiness. When you come to think that everything you've seen in Malaya has occurred from nothing in 3 generations. Administration which has managed in those short 75 years to put roads, railways, hospitals, police stations, education, schools, secondary as well as primary, whatever you like. And they've done it with clean hands and complete incorruptibility. The average British fellow went out to Africa or to the East to do jobs, enormously powerful jobs, without getting his fingers in the till. And in my estimation, the question as to whether Malaya will remain in the democratic group of nations of the world or will be forced into communism depends purely and simply on whether it is and will remain incorruptible. It's as simple as that. But when it comes to any form of denigration of the empire, denigration of the work done by the colonial empire of the past or the colonial civil servants here, it is never on the part of the Malay or Malaysian people, either Indian, Chinese or Malay, never. The ones who let it down, who sneer at it, are our own brother British people living at home who've never been further east than Margate Sands. They're the ones, if their eyes were opened to the truth of the matter, by God, they'd be proud to be Britishers. About time somebody told them so.
Such colonial servants created Penang, now at the confluence of 4 cultures, British, Chinese, Malay and India. The Hindu festival of Thaipusam, when they revere Lord Subramaniam, the spotless one, the son of Siva. From his chariot comes the sacred ash said to leave penitents impervious to pain. On this day, each Hindu seeking absolution for sins or showing gratitude for blessings has vowed to carry a kavadi, a symbolic burden, usually the image of a god in a frame decorated with plastic flowers and supported by spikes and hooks pinned into his body. Despite such mortification of the flesh, penitents claim they feel no pain. Indeed, some are positively jaunty. Though should drum beats and chanting stop, they can sink to the ground in agony. The fervour is contagious. On their day of self-torment and hypnotic prayer, the tongues of penitents are pierced with silver skewers. say they feel no pain, though there are exceptions. Some have vowed to make this pilgrimage every year for the rest of their life. Like carnival floats, 1,000 kavadis are carried today. They're bearers in that state of religious euphoria which suffers them to make such extreme theatric gestures of atonement.